So this is something clearly that I think is a bit, I think we should be defaulting, our default position should be capturing these individuals, and if we really can't, then I think we need to look at it. But we should be capturing them. And frankly, the other problem with this is that they're in the extremist belief, Alex, being a martyr is a great thing. I think we need to avoid giving them that opportunity to be a martyr. And this includes Al-Awlaki, and this includes bin Laden, if he's still alive.
Well, I mean, Osama bin Laden, let's cut right to the chase. Trained in the 80s, worked with the CIA. We know the Muslim brigades have been used to destabilize countries the West doesn't like. They were used against the Soviets. They're being used against the Russians. Today, it's a convenient boogeyman out there. We know the underwear bomber was allowed on the plane, protected, given a visa by the U.S. An unnamed intelligence agency told the State Department this. This is on record. And then we get the internal Homeland Security documents. Most of Homeland Security now, and Northcom, is set up for the American people, returning veterans, gun owners, conservatives. Law enforcement gave us those documents last year. They were confirmed to be accurate, and the Pentagon was hopping mad, and so was Homeland Security that we got them. But when we really look at this, right, this is a system that's been set up for the American people. And, you know, you're in Ireland right now. You said Northern Ireland leaders condemn bombing. I've got the New York Times article. I had Agent Steak Knife on before they killed him a few years ago, you know, British Special Forces, Special Air Services assigned to this. And he said that the IRA was run by British intelligence as a pretext to radicalize things, as an excuse to be in Ireland, especially Northern Ireland. I mean, come on. We know the Russians have staged terror. We know our own government has Operation Northwoods. What can you say about government actually being behind some of the terrorism in history?
Well, Alex, I got to stick with what I know to be the fact. I mean, some of these references you've referenced, you've mentioned, I have not read, and I can't speak to things I don't know.
Do you know about Northwoods?
Well, I don't know much about that. I've not studied that. But what I will say is that there's clearly, as of late, a tendency to start looking at internal threats more than external. Now, I cut my teeth as a lieutenant doing counterterrorism stuff in Germany back in the mid-'80s. And it was very clear then, and I'm not sure what changed between then and now in many aspects, but I know back then we were very much concerned about the Soviets funding radical groups within Germany. As a matter of fact, my first counterterrorism operations were focused on the RAF, sports group Hoffman, and things like that, where it was very clearly a third party, a third organization, being the Soviet Union, was funding a lot of that activity, as noted by the fact that once the Cold War ended, a lot of these groups faded off into the distance and never came back. I think that we have to be very cognizant of the fact that there is some real, energy been given now to our government looking internally. And I think in some cases it is not warranted by the fact that you're going to have veterans coming back who have clear psychological problems. But the way to deal with that is by giving them the treatment they need, not treating them as adversaries. And I think that's one of the things that has been trending lately, is to look at people who have come back and have problems as an internal enemy.
But more than that, what are your Pentagon associates saying about the fact that, I mean, as you admit, more of this is being swung around internally? From my research, I mean, here's an example. It came out in the Baltimore Sun that Ron Paul and myself and others, and we ended up getting the secret Army document, which they confirmed was real, so there's good guys in the military sent it to us, that when I go out and have an In the Fed rally, they've got military Army intelligence watching me, and it says in the memo, don't let them know you're with the Army. They may be terrorists and may kill you. So they're teaching the Army that I'm like some vampire that's going to try to tear their throat out?
There's a number of legal problems with that. And one of the things I came up against during Able Danger, which was the issue of posse comitatus. And I think it's a very good law for a number of reasons. First off, as you just mentioned, it is illegal for the Army to be augmenting directly civil law enforcement operations. That is clearly illegal. So that's one of those things that I know people like Senator Arlen Specter were very much against the idea of allowing folks to be used for purposes of law enforcement, and there's good reasons for it. And this is something that harkens back to the 1960s, where it was equally a bad idea then to use military intelligence folks for civil law enforcement, and I think it's the same thing now if this is going on. Now, I don't know of anyone within my circle of associates and friends who have been involved in that. It's not to say I don't know if it's happening. I personally don't know. I've not been involved. I don't know of any one of my intelligence friends who have been involved. But I know that there's been contingency planning done to look at how the military could be brought in to support civil unrest, support the civil authorities during times of civil unrest. Now, that's something that I know has been kicked around a lot over the past 30 years, frankly. The idea of coming in time of crisis to actually...
Rex 84. Well, let me ask you this. And yeah. I mean, I literally, in the last 10 years, have had guys get out. They're obviously military in plain clothes and even threaten me in parking lots. I have national news everywhere saying I'm calling for violence when I'm not. Does it sound to you, Colonel, like they're trying to set me up for something?
Well, it sounds like any other whisper campaign. I mean, Alex, as you know, I was victimized by a whisper campaign by the Pentagon as well when I first broke ranks. And I think there's something else that you need to look at here regarding the fact that when, you know, there's something called CIFA. Are you familiar with CIFA? The Counterintelligence Force? Yeah, that... Everything that I heard about that was, I hate to use this as a term, but it was like Darth Vader's vanguard. By the fact that those people they had no interest in counterintelligence. They were essentially, as I understand it, Steve Cambone's dirty tricks folks. And they, in one case, they were surveilling a Secret Service special agent whose father was speaking out against the Bush administration. I mean, no, I have no doubt that this sort of thing has happened.
So is this just harassment then? Because, I mean, it's like a No Way Out when he's walking along and who are these guys? Well, they're formerly associated with special forces, and I'm just like a regular guy with a family who has a big talk show, but, I mean, it's getting really creepy.
And that's one of those things that I think that this is why I've spoken out against the use of blackwater contractors and as some form of mercenary. And this is where there's been a real gray area, Alec, that we have to look at, by the fact that I think that there's some real loopholes that have been used by the military and by the intelligence organizations to hire folks who serve in these roles. It's a very murky gray area. And for example, in Afghanistan, the CIA, up until recently, denied it. I was there to handle 2 of the KIAs from CIA, who were there as Blackwater back in 2003. So this is a loophole that a number of organizations have used to hire people off the street who have military background to do things which I think, if they were shown to be in the light of day, they would be shown to be illegal. And this is where people have tried to get around posse comitatus, of ways of trying to influence the thinking of adversaries. You know, and frankly, some people just don't appreciate people like you and others who speak out. And I think,
but Colonel, now we're learning the adversaries are somebody like you or me who just speak out for the Constitution and Bill of Rights as some type of Darth Vader Praetorian Guard. And I know a lot of JAG officers who are retired, law professors we've had on. They're very, very concerned. You know, Atticott from San Antonio. And others, but I mean, it's just for the general public out there. I don't think they realize that this whole black op or slash contractor, they may be contractors, are just out there really intimidating people, surveilling people. We've only got a few minutes left. I can't wait till August to have you on to really go over the book in detail, and I hope people will order it because I know I'm going to read it, and it's going to be extremely informative, Colonel Shaffer. But in closing, shifting gears out to what happened in Poland, do you think it's suspicious that the almost entire leadership of the Polish government's aircraft went down?
Well, there's 2 parts to it. First, you know, it's like the old, whenever someone had a cold in Soviet leadership, you know, that was a bad sign. I think, you know, a cold is not a cold when it comes to the Soviets, and this may be something that people need to look at as well. From what I understand, the Polish president was very independent. And I think that the fact that everybody went down together in these questionable circumstances, you've got to look at that very hard. The Tupolev, which crashed, frankly, has a horrible record. When I flew back from Afghanistan, I flew through Tashkent, and the airline that I was supposed to fly back on flew a lot of those. Fortunately for me, they had pretty much grounded all the Tupolevs, and we're now using Boeing aircraft. So that aircraft by itself has had a hugely poor safety record.
But it is stupid to put that much leadership in one aircraft.
Well, you never do it. I mean, I think that's a mistake that you just shouldn't make. That's an amateur mistake, Alex. You should never make that mistake, especially when you have basically the entire military general staff, pretty much every major officer within the government and the civilian side. You got to ask yourself, why would they do that, especially with an aircraft, as I mentioned, with that kind of poor safety record.
Colonel, we've only got 1 minute left. You wanted to make a comment on the bombing in Ireland. What's your take on that?
Well, you know, I think it's frankly, from what I've seen from being here just a little bit of time, there's still a great deal of dissension within Northern Ireland. I think there's some chaos there. I think that as things settle in, you're going to see a few things like this. But I think the good news is, if there's any good news, is the fact that I think things have been reduced. You don't have these mass bombings. If nothing else, there was no casualties in this. I think it was meant to send a message. So at least here, I believe that I think they're on a downhill run of terrorism being an effective tool. I'm hoping that people understand that that things here are pretty much settled. I think, but in other places they're not. And I think that anytime we look at terrorism, we have to look realistically at long-term threats.